History is filled with shadows, but none cast a darker one than Adolf Hitler. We all know the dictator, the war, and the destruction, but what if the real story of Hitler is far more hidden than the history books dare to reveal? Behind the speeches, the propaganda, and the ruthless march of power lies a man shaped by strange secrets, forbidden influences, and decisions that still haunt the world today. Few people know about Hitler's mysterious obsessions with the occult, his fascination with secret societies, and the strange forces that guided his rise. Fewer still know about the early failures, the humiliations, and the unknown figures who quietly pulled strings in the background. This is not the Hitler you read about in school. This is the hidden Hitler, a story buried in classified archives, whispered in forgotten testimonies, and hidden behind the smoke of war. How did a struggling painter transform into the architect of the deadliest conflict in history? Who helped him rise, and why were so many secrets deliberately erased after the war? From his strange youth to the shadowy deals of his regime, and from the myths of his ancestry to the forbidden experiments carried out under his rule, we are about to uncover what the world was never meant to know. Stay with me, because over the next, we will peel back the layers of deception and uncover the untold truth of Hitler's hidden story, secrets that will make you question everything you thought you knew about World War II. Before Hitler became the most infamous dictator in history, he was just a boy from a small Austrian town, lonely, troubled, and misunderstood. Most history books brush past his early years, but hidden inside those fragile beginnings are clues to the man he would become. Adolf was born in 1889 in Braunau am Inn, a quiet town on the border of Germany. His father, Alois, was strict, distant, and obsessed with discipline. His mother, Clara, on the other hand, was deeply protective and loving, perhaps the only person young Adolf truly felt close to. But even in this small home, shadows were forming. As a child, Hitler was restless and rebellious. He failed repeatedly in school, often clashing with teachers who thought he was lazy and unmotivated. Yet, beneath his failures, there was a burning pride, an inner belief that he was destined for greatness. He dreamed of becoming an artist, sketching buildings and landscapes for hours, convinced that he would one day make a name for himself. But fate had other plans. Twice he applied to the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, and twice he was rejected. These rejections crushed him, leaving him homeless, wandering the streets, and selling cheap paintings to survive. But here is where history hides a chilling twist. While in Vienna, young Hitler was exposed to dangerous ideas of nationalism, anti-Semitism, and conspiracy theories that circulated in the city's dark corners. In coffeehouses and backrooms, he listened to fiery speeches and radical pamphlets that painted the world in terms of enemies and races. These ideas did not vanish, they grew like poison inside him. At the same time, strange stories surround his ancestry. Some researchers whisper about secrets in his bloodline, possible connections to families of influence, and even theories of hidden paternity that were deliberately erased from official records. While many historians dismiss these claims, the truth remains clouded. Why were so many documents about his family destroyed? Why was his lineage always kept vague? The mystery of his origins continues to fuel speculation, but one thing is clear: the failure, the humiliation, and the rejection of his youth planted the seeds of anger that would later explode onto the world stage. Adolf Hitler, the homeless painter, would one day reimagine himself as Adolf Hitler, the Führer. And those who ignored the broken boy would soon face the wrath of the dictator he became. This hidden beginning reminds us that evil is not born overnight. It grows in silence, through wounds, rejection, and dark influences that go unnoticed. When Hitler rose to power, the world saw him as a fiery politician, but few knew of the strange forces that shaped his beliefs. Behind the speeches, parades, and propaganda, Hitler was deeply fascinated with the occult, mysticism, and secret societies. His obsession with hidden knowledge would play a far greater role in his rise than most history books reveal. During his years in Vienna and later in Munich, Hitler came into contact with groups that blended politics, race theories, and the supernatural. One of these was the mysterious Thule Society, a secret organization that combined ancient myths, occult rituals, and nationalist ideology. They believed in the existence of a master race connected to ancient civilizations, and they saw Hitler as a vessel for their vision. This was not just politics, it was prophecy dressed in darkness. Hitler became fixated on symbols, signs, and rituals. The swastika, now forever linked to terror, was originally an ancient spiritual symbol. To Hitler and his followers, it became a banner of mystical destiny. He surrounded himself with men who shared his interest in arcane knowledge, figures like Heinrich Himmler, who turned the SS into an order of knights obsessed with runes, rituals, and pseudo-religion. But why? Why would a man preparing to conquer nations waste his energy on myths and magic? The answer lies in control. Hitler understood that people are not just moved by logic, they are moved by belief, fear, and myth. By blending politics with ancient symbols, he gave his followers something larger than themselves to worship. His rise was not just a political revolution, it was a psychological spell cast over a desperate nation. Even more disturbing are the whispers of secret expeditions funded by the Nazi regime. Himmler's SS sent missions to Tibet, the Middle East, and even the Arctic, searching for traces of lost civilizations, ancient relics, and mystical powers that could strengthen their empire. Documents suggest that Nazi scientists and occultists were hunting for artifacts like the Spear of Destiny, believed to hold supernatural powers, and hidden texts from forgotten societies. Historians still argue how much of this was superstition and how much was real strategy, but one fact is undeniable: Hitler cloaked his political empire in myth to give it unshakable authority. He transformed nationalism into a near religion and made himself its prophet. This is the hidden story of how occult beliefs and secret societies gave shape to one of the darkest regimes in history. Hitler did not simply conquer with weapons, he conquered with symbols, rituals, and a dark faith that turned millions into blind followers. When we think of Adolf Hitler's rise to power, we imagine fiery speeches, mass rallies, and the desperate cries of a broken nation. But behind the stage, behind the lights and microphones, another story was unfolding, a story of hidden deals, secret financiers, and powerful figures who quietly pushed Hitler toward the throne of Germany. The truth is, Hitler did not rise alone. After World War I, Germany was left shattered by the Treaty of Versailles. The economy was collapsing, unemployment was rampant, and people were desperate for a savior. Hitler's speeches ignited emotions, but passion alone doesn't build an empire. Money does. And money began to flow into the Nazi Party from unexpected places. Industrialists, businessmen, and even foreign investors saw in Hitler an opportunity. To them, he was not just a politician, he was a weapon against communism. Wealthy German families, fearful of losing their industries to socialist uprisings, poured resources into the Nazi movement. Internationally, whispers suggest that certain banks and corporations also gave indirect support, hoping that Hitler's rise would stabilize Germany and open new opportunities for profit. Some of these names still spark debate today, because they remain tied to global power, but money wasn't the only hidden force. Secret negotiations also played a role. Before Hitler ever became chancellor, there were closed-door meetings between Nazi leaders and German elites, where deals were struck. In exchange for political backing, Hitler promised protection for industries and suppression of worker revolts. These arrangements were rarely written, but they paved the way for his legal takeover. Even within politics, backroom alliances shaped his future. Many Germans didn't want Hitler as chancellor, but key figures believed they could control him if they placed him in power. They thought he was just a tool, a loudmouth who would do their bidding. History would prove how fatally wrong they were. The hidden backers weren't only businessmen and politicians. There were also mysterious organizations that spread propaganda and influenced public opinion, feeding the Nazi message across Europe. These groups quietly built a network of support that turned Hitler from a fringe agitator into a national leader. This is the part of history that often remains in the shadows. Hitler's rise was not a miracle of charisma alone. It was engineered, financed, and facilitated by people who believed they were securing their own futures. In helping him, they unleashed a storm that would consume the world. The dictator's power was not just built on hate, it was built on money, deals, and silent hands that fed the fire until it was too late to put out. While Hitler's army stormed across Europe, another war was being fought in the shadows, a war of science, secrecy, and forbidden experiments. Behind the front lines, deep inside hidden laboratories and underground bunkers, Nazi scientists were working on projects so advanced, some seemed torn from the pages of science fiction. These were Hitler's secret weapons, the Wunderwaffe, or wonder weapons, that he believed could change the fate of the war. The most infamous of these was the V-weapons program. The V-1 flying bomb and the V-2 rocket were the world's first long-range guided missiles, capable of striking London from hidden launch sites in occupied Europe. For the people of Britain, these attacks came without warning, a terrifying glimpse of modern warfare. The V-2, in particular, was decades ahead of its time. It laid the groundwork for modern rocketry, space exploration, and even intercontinental missiles. But at the time, its purpose was clear: to terrorize and destroy. Yet the V-weapons were only the beginning. Whispers persist of even darker projects: flying discs, anti-gravity experiments, and weapons of unimaginable destruction. Some researchers claim that Nazi scientists were exploring ideas for a nuclear bomb, racing against the Allies to harness atomic power. While they failed to complete the project, the evidence shows that uranium research and reactor experiments were underway. Had they succeeded, the outcome of the war might have been unimaginably different. Perhaps most disturbing of all were the human experiments conducted under the banner of science. In camps across occupied Europe, prisoners were subjected to cruel and horrific tests, altitude experiments, chemical trials, and medical procedures with no regard for human life. These so-called studies were not only crimes against humanity, but also attempts to push the limits of endurance for the Nazi war machine. In addition, there were hidden projects that still fuel conspiracy theories today: strange documents about Die Glock, or the bell. This mysterious device, allegedly tested in secret facilities, has been described as a machine capable of bending gravity, producing immense energy, or even opening doors to unknown dimensions. Whether myth or reality, the fact that so many Nazi projects remain classified or destroyed keeps the speculation alive. Hitler's obsession with secret weapons was not just about winning battles, it was about creating symbols of ultimate power. He believed these machines would secure his place in history as a world conqueror, even as his armies faltered. But the hidden truth is this: while some of these weapons were real, others were experiments that cost countless lives, built on cruelty and desperation. The war was not only fought on battlefields, it was fought in laboratories, in hidden bunkers, and in the minds of men willing to sacrifice morality for power. These secret weapons remind us how close the world came to a future dominated by terror and technology in the wrong hands. History remembers Hitler as the leader of Nazi Germany, locked in deadly conflict with much of the world. But behind the battlefield lines and political speeches lay a web of hidden alliances, secret negotiations, and strange global connections that shaped his path to power. Many of these ties were never meant to see the light of day. One of the most striking was Hitler's early support from certain Western figures and companies. Before the war, German industries traded with international corporations. Oil, machinery, and financial investments flowed across borders, sometimes even after hostilities began. Documents reveal that German firms with Nazi ties had links to American and European businesses, creating a network of silent cooperation. For many, profit came before politics. Then there were the political deals, alliances that seemed impossible, yet were struck in secrecy. In 1939, Hitler signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact with the Soviet Union. Publicly, Germany and the USSR were enemies, ideologically opposed. Yet in secret, they agreed to carve up Eastern Europe between them. This hidden deal stunned the world and bought Hitler precious time to prepare his war machine. Another overlooked connection lies in the Middle East. Hitler's ideology found strange sympathizers among certain leaders who opposed British and French control. There are records of communications, promises, and even broadcasts made in Arabic to win support. These relationships were carefully kept from public view, but they reveal how far Nazi influence reached beyond Europe. Even in South America, whispers of hidden connections abound. Networks of Nazi sympathizers existed long before the war ended. These ties would later provide escape routes for war criminals fleeing justice, but they also suggest that Hitler's regime saw beyond immediate conquest. They were planning for survival. Perhaps the most shocking hidden alliance was not about nations, but about secret societies and powerful individuals. Some historians argue that Hitler benefited from occult-linked organizations that saw him as a chosen instrument. Whether myth or reality, what we know is that he maintained close relations with influential circles that worked behind curtains of secrecy, shaping propaganda and spreading fear. These hidden alliances remind us that wars are not only fought with bullets and tanks. They are also battles of diplomacy, trade, and secret handshake agreements. Hitler was a master of deception, and his regime thrived on alliances that the world would not fully uncover until years after the war ended. The hidden truth is simple yet chilling: Hitler did not rise and sustain power alone. Around him existed a web of shadowy deals, foreign sympathies, and global enablers who, knowingly or unknowingly, helped prolong one of history's darkest. On April 30, 1945, as Soviet forces stormed Berlin, history tells us Adolf Hitler ended his life in a bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery. The official story: he shot himself, his body was burned, and the ashes buried in secret. But from the very moment the news broke, doubts, whispers, and conspiracy theories began to spread. Did Hitler really die in that bunker, or did he escape into the shadows of history? The chaos of Berlin's final days created the perfect environment for mystery. Witnesses gave conflicting accounts. Some swore they saw his body, others claimed the remains were unrecognizable. The Soviet Union, which seized the bunker, released only fragments of information. Stalin himself suggested Hitler may have fled, fueling suspicion worldwide. One of the most famous theories suggests Hitler escaped to South America. After the war, countless Nazi officials did in fact flee through secret escape routes known as ratlands. Argentina, Brazil, and Chile became safe havens for high-ranking Nazis. Eyewitness reports surfaced of Hitler living in remote villages, guarded by loyal followers. Though most historians dismiss these as myth, declassified documents reveal that even the CIA and FBI investigated claims of Hitler sightings for years after 1945. Another theory claims Hitler fled to Antarctica, where Nazis had established secret bases during the war. According to French researchers, advanced technology and hidden submarines may have carried him there, far beyond the reach of Allied forces. While evidence remains scarce, the persistence of these stories shows how strongly the world doubted the official version. There are even darker whispers. Some suggest Hitler's body was never properly identified because the Soviet remains were incomplete. Tests on fragments said to be Hitler's skull later showed they belonged to a woman. This shocking discovery reignited debate. Was the world lied to about his death? Yet the question remains, why would the truth be hidden? Some argue that Hitler's escape was covered up to avoid mass panic. Others believe the Allies allowed rumors to spread as psychological warfare, ensuring the myth of Hitler would linger as a warning whether he truly died in that Berlin bunker or vanished into secret exile. One fact is undeniable: the mystery of Hitler's death became part of his legacy. Unlike most dictators, whose deaths marked the end of their power, Hitler's supposed death became a breeding ground for legends. The uncertainty keeps his shadow alive even decades later. The hidden story of his final days reminds us of this. Sometimes history is written not by what happened, but by what we are allowed to believe. Adolf Hitler's life ended, or perhaps disappeared, in 1945, but his shadow has never truly left the world. More than 70 years later, his story is still surrounded by secrecy, unanswered questions, and hidden truths that refuse to die. But why? Why does Hitler's legacy remain more mysterious than almost any other leader in history? The answer lies in the deliberate veil of secrecy woven around his rise, his rule, and his fall. After World War II, entire archives of Nazi documents were sealed away. Some were destroyed, others locked in government vaults for decades. The Allies were not only fighting to defeat Hitler, they were racing to claim his secrets. His scientists, his weapons, even his occult experiments were absorbed by victorious nations in programs like Operation Paperclip, which brought Nazi experts into American projects that would later shape space travel and modern warfare. What was hidden from the public was not just the crimes, but also the knowledge. The secrecy gave birth to countless myths. Did Hitler escape? Did Nazi technology survive underground? Were secret societies involved in keeping the ideology alive? Each unanswered question became fuel for new theories, ensuring that Hitler's shadow lived on far beyond his lifetime. But the hidden legacy goes even deeper. Hitler's use of propaganda, symbols, and mass psychology created a blueprint for manipulation that still echoes today. His ability to fuse politics with myth, fear, and spectacle reshaped how leaders around the world understood power. Even now, governments study how he controlled minds, how he turned lies into truth, and how he built a movement that was willing to follow him into destruction. There is also a darker legacy: the survival of Nazi networks after the war. Many officials escaped justice, hiding in South America, the Middle East, and even within Europe itself. Secret organizations protected them, funding new causes and movements. Some of these shadows still surface in extremist ideologies today, a haunting reminder that the past is never truly buried. Hitler's hidden story is not just about one man, it is about the power of secrets, lies, and the manipulation of history. What we are told is only part of the picture. The rest remains buried in classified files, destroyed evidence, and whispered testimonies. And perhaps that is why Hitler remains one of the most studied figures in history, Because his story is unfinished, the ultimate truth may never be revealed. But what we can see clearly is this: Hitler's hidden story is not just about the past, it is a warning for the future. When secrecy, myth, and power combine, history does not just repeat itself, it returns in darker forms.